I've written the following on Facebook, and this is quoted. Here's a hard truth to swallow. If your church stopped meeting and requires masks, you can rest assured it is not part of the remnant church. In response, some of my good friends have provided their thoughts indicating that they thought I was being extreme in my assessment of the church. Steve and Sean, among others, thank you for your thoughtful responses. I want to make some things clear, though. I do believe that COVID is a real problem and not a hoax. I believe that we should take thoughtful, measured responses to such a threat, and that includes the church. I have compassion and appreciation of all of the frontline healthcare workers battling this daily on the front lines. And as you know, my dad was a pastor, and my grandfather was a pastor, and so I know the plight of pastors, and I appreciate what they do on a weekly basis. My original post on this thread was addressing the church's initial response to the situation and how they continue to respond in a subservient way. When COVID first came out and lockdowns were all over the place, the church should have acted as a co-equal with government and said, thank you for the information, but you have no right to dictate anything about what our church does or doesn't do for the most part. Then churches should have pulled their expert healthcare workers together in a summit at each church at the local level and scientifically and systematically and prayerfully tried to understand the situation and the best response. Then that group should have been willing to open itself up to criticism in an open forum with the rest of the church body to sharpen its understanding and its planned response. Only then should it have made an offensive move, not a defensive move, to implement measures it thought preserve public health, individual rights, religious liberty, God's word, among other things. Now that didn't happen. Instead, the church assumed that the government knew all and let it take the lead. The church was stupid. They should know from years of earlier persecution that the government wants to take away our rights and frequently is wrong about most things. Also, as a former captain in the Army who worked in state and federal government for years, I know that typically the one-size-fits-all response of the government is many times misplaced. Think about the Tuskegee experiment or the nuclear war testing on soldiers for the atom bomb, and I could go on and on. He that is faithful in little will be given responsibility over more. The way the church reacted by buckling to government authority to close their churches at a drop of a hat told me all I need to know about most of these so-called churches, that they are not remnant churches, that if they will buckle to that little pressure, then when real persecution comes, they will be useless and feckless, pretty much as I see them now on all major issues facing Christianity in the world today. Now, adding insult to injury, the two most preached about subjects, it's always about love, it's always about don't fear, those are continuing to be the mainstay topics of the pulpit. And yet, upon the first real test of that in the 20th century American culture, the church completely folded and reacted out of fear to knee-jerk close their churches immediately and assume the ever-changing media and bureaucratic medical advice on masks was the truth. I say shame on them. So yes, I maintain that the church in general acts sheepish and is not taking a leadership stance on these issues. Why can we go to Walmart, mask or no mask, and not attend our church? If a government entity is requiring masks for large gatherings like Walmart, as they do in California, then at the very least they should allow a church to be open with the same legal standard. That's called equal protection under the law. Instead, we see a bias against churches and the virus being used to advance an anti-church agenda. Why are we not quarantining like we did for the plague, polio, and many other like situations in the past? Why are we ruining our economy and allowing government to trample our religious and individual rights based on science that is very shaky at best? Why create a false sense of security for the non-quarantined sick to wear a mask and mingle in public and spread the sickness more? The narrative is out of control. Creating alternative video methods for seeing church, that's a great thing. But it doesn't meet the command of where two or more are gathered, there I am, in my opinion. If you can't have a two-way conversation, then you aren't gathered. I'm sorry. In fact, churches for years have had one-way conversations from the pulpit, and that has been a travesty as well. Being a Christian implies inherent risk, brothers. We can be smart, but let's be really smart, and let's lead in our homes and in our churches as the courageous women and men that God has made us. Let's not take our cues from the world, brothers. I'm calling on all Christian medical professionals to come together and get their scientific story straight. And do so in a way that doesn't destroy individual and religious freedom that we fought for in every war for American independence. I'm calling on the church to solve its own problems and be the courageous institution that God intended. At the very least, churches should now have the courage to open up fully and apply the same standard as a Walmart uses. I hope you understand my point.